Welcome to an exclusive Miami recorded conversation discussing the film Sin La Habana, an official selection of the 38th Miami Film Festival and an international premiere in our Jordan Wrestler First Feature Award category. My name is Jaie Laplante, and I am the Executive Director and Co-Director of Programming for the festival. Whether you are watching this conversation in the movie theater or at home following the screening, I thank you for joining me to welcome Kaveh Nabatian from Canada. Welcome, Kaveh.
Hi, welcome to you. Thank you to anyone who's watching this movie.
So I wanted to start off and say that this is one of the most enthralling and exciting debuts that I have seen in the past year or several years. And I wanted to congratulate you for the energy of the film. It's just fantastic.
Oh, thank you very much. That's nice to hear.
So my first question is about, I think, part of the reason the movie has so much energy is because of your background also in music. You composed a lot of the music for the film. From what I've read about you, you have a strong background with music. I was wondering if you could talk about how music influences your filmmaking.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for me, I think everything I'm doing in music is described as kind of cinematic, and everything I do in cinema is described as quite musical. I think that like where I'm trying to find my voice is where it's kind of Venn diagram where those two meet. And so definitely like when I'm thinking of a scene, I think of it sonically as much as visually. Like I think of, the sound of the radiator, the sound of the rain, or the sound of the distant radios, and then what musically or sound design wise we could do to amplify that, to amplify the emotions that are going on in the scene anyway. So yeah, I mean, music is kind of like as much a part of everything I do cinematically as anything visual.
Yeah, I think, it really adds to just the richness and the layers and the textures. Can you also talk about some of the footage that you created? I think it looks like it's maybe possibly Super 8 or 16 millimeters, sort of like a textured footage that we see periodically.
Yeah. So that's a Bolex that I bought when I was in film school at Concordia University in Montreal, like a long time ago. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I just started taking it out again because there's something about the cleanness of the digital images that we were seeing everywhere that was bugging me. So I just started just shooting for fun with these Bolexes. And the thing with Bolexes is that not only are they on film, but they're also that every time you end a reel, there's all these magical flares that happen because of the way the daylight spool works, the way the mechanics of that particular camera are. And there's something about that randomness and richness of color that happens when that happens that is like the exact opposite of what you get with an Alexa or a Red or something. And because this is so much a film about perspectives, and there's a certain coldness to when Leonardo arrives in Montreal, I wanted to have this kind of dream world be this highly textured, rich, colorful thing that only exists in his mind. And then at the very end, of course, that textured dream world combined with the reality to make a new reality.
Oh, it's a great choice. So what led you to Cuba in this story for your first feature film? How did that happen?
Well, yeah, it's my first feature film, but it's been a long time coming. I started working on it. I was looking at old emails with Pablo Herrera, who was the co-writer, and we started talking about it in 2005. So it's way too long, really. But at that time, I went down to Cuba kind of with the typical tourist vision of it. And, it was like Buena Vista Social Club had come out kind of recently, and the eyes of the world were on Cuba. And as a musician, of course, I was fascinated by the idea of this like place where it's, tropical communist country where everyone plays music. And so I went there. And then, of course, the reality, there is that is a part of the reality of Cuba, but there's a lot of layers and there's a lot of, it's a very rich and complex place. And so I became fascinated by some of those complexities, and in particular, the complexities between tourists and Cubans, and how there's this sense of objectification that tourists often have towards Cubans, which I had initially, I was waiting for these like magical Caribbean musicians to appear everywhere. And then also how the typical Cuban will look at a tourist, at a Yuma, as this like source of money or a passport, a way to get out of the country or a way to help feed their families. And then what happens when those kind of walls break down, and what happens when the Yuma and the Cubans start to actually see each other as people rather than as symbols of what they imagine a certain representation of what a Yuma or a Cuban is.
Got it. So I also want to congratulate you on the casting in the movie. I have this sense, especially among the lead characters, that they're so real. I mean, you forget that they're actors. How much collaboration did the actors have with you in creating their characters, or even the dialogue? I mean, it's really extraordinary.
Yeah, well, tons. I mean, there was no professional actors in the film other than the guy who plays Julio, who's done some acting in the past and was also the choreographer of the film. I mean, the story didn't really change that much once we got the actors involved, but because the original script was written in English, when we went to Cuba and started translating it with the actors, it meant that they put their whole own thing into it and their own Cubanness. And there was certain things that I'd written with Pablo in Cuban Spanish, and it was actually turned out to be better to start from English and let them translate it themselves and come up with their own way of saying it. And it's actually a technique that I'd like to use in the future, is to not really come with an exact script, but just really the story of what has to happen in a particular scene and let the actors find their own words. It's not a new technique, but it kind of happened just because of the way things worked down there, and the fact that people's English down there was also generally not very good. So it was a lot of me explaining the scene over and over again in different ways, and then them kind of just jamming on it. So I'd film them doing their dialogue and then changing it and trying it again until we found the exact right thing, so that when we were actually shooting, it tended to be pretty close to something that had happened in a rehearsal. So it wasn't like they were really improvising, but it all came out of an improvisation. So it's kind of, Mike Lee does that all the time. And it was we were trying to go in that kind of direction.
Yeah, I thought a lot about Mike Lee when I was watching the movie, and I'm really happy to hear you say that. So, we all bring, ourselves to movies, and we project ourselves into what's happening on the screen, and, have empathy with the story. And for me personally, why this film meant so much to me is because I felt that through Leo's journey, I was reminded about how we can often let our perceived expectations of ourselves from other people, dictate a lot of our actions or our stories. And that's something very beautiful, is that Leo sort of learns to overcome that or let that go. Was that an idea that was present from the start, or is that something that evolved through time, or maybe came in later, or is this all in my head?
No, that is absolutely what the movie's about. It's about a guy who's a little bit lost, who finds his way, or who finds his voice. And I think that, to be honest, that probably has a lot to do with me. I'm searching for my voice, and with this movie, I think I've gotten a little bit closer to being able to speak with a voice that is, we all have these gifts, and if we're lucky enough, we get to exteriorize those gifts in a way that moves our lives forward in a positive way. And so for him, he has this idea of himself as this classical ballet dancer, and then because of his race and because of a bunch of extenuating circumstances, he's not able to be that ballet dancer within Cuba, and then he doesn't get the job that he expects in Canada either, which is actually a very common thing. A lot of Cuban ballet dancers will leave Cuba and come to Canada expecting to get a job, because it does happen, and then they don't right away. So then he's kind of stuck between his Afro-Cuban heritage, his classical ballet training, and this new paradigm of living in Canada. And it's only at the end that he's actually able to bring those three together and actually find this. It's kind of like he's had that 16mm dance has been going in his head the whole time, but he's never been able to do it. And I feel like we all have that. We all have our dance or our song, and sometimes we glimpse it, or sometimes we can actually totally become it. And when you see people who have that self-realization, you really feel it. There's this calm and this energy from them. And I think that's something that we're all kind of going for. And that film, for Leonardo, it's about getting one step a lot closer to who he really is, and who not who Sarah wants him to be, not who Nassim wants him to be, not who his family wants him to be, but who he really is and who he needs to be to move forward in his life.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for expressing yourself so personally there. I can feel the calmness in you. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So now that you've created this beautiful film, I mean, the next step is sharing it, and that's what of course we're doing here at the Miami Film Festival. So I know that the film had its world premiere in Canada, in Montreal, in October. We're very blessed and honored to have the international premiere at the Miami Film Festival here. What other plans do you have, or what else is happening with this film? Are Canadians going to be able to see it? Where else are you going to be able to share it in the upcoming future?
Yeah, well, I mean, as everyone knows, it's been a completely insane year, and it's definitely been an insane year for film distribution. So the future is not totally settled by any means. We're hoping to play at a bunch of great film festivals, and hoping that it can also play at film festivals that have an in-person, like where people can watch it in the theater, because it is a film that I spent an enormous amount of energy on the image and on the sonic qualities of it. And it will definitely have a theatrical release in Canada, hopefully probably in the fall. But also depending, who knows when people are going to get vaccinated, when things are going to happen.
Mhm.
And yeah, we're looking, for a US distributor, European distributor, film festivals. We're still very much at the beginning of its kind of festival run. And, we hope it has a nice long life. And to me, it's also really, really important that the film is seen by people who are into ballet or into dance in general, and also by Iranians, because Iranians, and especially Iranian Jews, are so rarely presented in cinema. And then, of course, by Cubans and the Latin community in general, whether in the US or in Latin America. Because I think that, it's definitely an immigrant story that I think will speak to most immigrants, because most immigrants, like my father, come here with these ideas of, streets paved with gold, and then the reality is totally different. But of course, this film being about a very particular Cuban case, I think it speaks specifically to a Latin American immigration experience, and a Cuban one in particular. And that's also why I'm so excited that it's playing in Miami, because it's a huge Cuban expat community there. And I think it'll be interesting for people who are maybe second generation or first generation Cubans living in the United States to see. I wonder how it will resonate or not resonate, or what the kind of the vibe is between what people are seeing and what people have lived themselves.
Well, we promise to share it with you. So everyone who's watching now in the theater, remember to vote for the Audience Award. This film is eligible for the Audience Award. Everyone watching online, you can also vote following your screening. It's a great way for us to get your reactions and to be able to share them. So I want to thank you, Kaveh, so much for sharing the film with us. We promise to get you down to Miami someday for some beach time and some mojitos. But best of luck on the journey, and thanks once again for sharing the film with us in Miami.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really pleased that we can show our film in Miami.